Hello and welcome to a conversation with Kimberly Davis, the Democratic candidate running to fill retiring State Senator Betty Little's 45th District seat. I'm Jared Stamm, editor at Manchester Media, and I'm being joined today by our reporters Jay Mullen and Austin Crozier. We're pleased to be sitting down together in Manchester Media's offices with Kimberly Davis to discuss the issues facing the residents of the 45th District and your positions and plans.
Great, thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here. So let's get started.
All right.
So I'm gonna ask the first question.
All right.
Yes, I can get to my first question. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state senate.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm currently the Clinton County Treasurer. I'm in my 7th year, 2nd term. Before that, I was a bank manager at Glens Falls National Bank. And so certainly I think it's important to run to improve the lives of the people in the district. And I think it's important to have someone with a financial background to do that. I don't think there's enough people in Albany with a financial background. And as one of, or if not the highest tax state, it's really important that we have someone who is looking at how that impacts everyone within not only the district, but in New York.
Kimberly, I'm going to take the second question again. My name's Austin Crozier. I'm the reporter for the Grayville Sentinel. What do you bring to the table that your opponent Dan Steck does not?
Two major things, I think. One certainly is the financial background. Before even that, I was in banking previously, but I think the most important thing is how I deal with people. Both my previous assessor position as well as treasurer's position, you have to be political to get there, but you're not supposed to be partisan. I don't want anyone coming into my office and thinking I'm treating them differently because they have a different letter next to their name. Unlike my opponent who, when you watch his Facebook page, very hyper-partisan, tends to demonize the left, as he calls us. That's not helpful. You're supposed to represent all of your constituents, and I think it's harmful the way he, acts. That if you're a Democrat with a problem, are you going to feel comfortable going to his office? So I think that's something that's really important. I grew up in a Republican family, so I will not demonize or even generalize Republicans as a whole, because if I do so, I'm demonizing my brother, my father. I don't think it's helpful. I think when a bill is coming in front of me, it's not going to matter if a Republican or a Democrat has written it. It's going to be how is this going to affect our region and how we're going to pay for it.
All right, Kimberly, I'm going to have the next question.
Sure.
I'm Jay Mullen with the Whitehall Times. So COVID-19 has had a substantial impact on business owners and farmers in northern New York. What are your plans and initiatives to assist these groups in getting back on their feet again?
Sure, it's affected everyone. I don't think any group is different than any other. It's affected, yes, business and farms. It's affected education. It's affected government. We certainly had to, shut down to 50%, during those hardest times. So it affects everyone. I think we certainly need to look at the problems that our, especially small businesses, are facing. You look at the very small restaurants that have such limited capacity. They've been able to at least go outdoors during the warm weather months, but we have to be able to make sure that they're going to be able to survive the winter, and people aren't going to be able to go outside as much anymore. So we have to both balance, the health of the public while we're supporting these businesses. So we need to make sure that we're listening to them with what they need. Whether it's, unfortunately, a lot of this is also on the federal level. Having another round of PPP, for example, it's extremely frustrating that DC is not acting on the crisis that's going on. New York isn't different than any of the other states, but state and local governments need the support of the federal government, and we're just not getting it right now.
Thank you.
So in general, just going to the state level, how do you think the state has handled the crisis? And as a member of the state senate in Albany, how would you like to see Albany move forward in terms of getting back to normal?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if we will.
Yeah, well,
Certainly, at least in the short term. I think overall, New York has done well there certainly have been missteps. The nursing home crisis, was very unfortunate. There is no playbook. We had nothing like this to fall back on. Unfortunately, that was something that cost a lot of people their lives. But overall, I think it was very smart that the governor took a regional approach. I certainly had some back and forth with my opponent in the papers about the reopening. He wanted to speed it up. I didn't think that was, a sensible thing to do. And so I think they've taken the precautionary steps. We've certainly seen the incredible decrease in cases where we're seeing increases in a lot of other states. So I think overall they've done a good job.
Kimberly, you're one of the first, if not the only candidate that we've spoken to specifically mention being a supporter of labor unions. Can you explain to our readers and viewers why you're so passionate about labor unions and how you aim to protect their rights?
Absolutely. So I come from a union family. My father was a civil servant, and later in life my mother became one as well. And so when unions fight for their workers' rights and benefits, that trickles down to everyone else in business. When I started in one of my careers in banking, you're looking at your benefits package, and I said, how many sick days do we get? Up to 5. Well, what does that mean? Well, your manager decides whether you get them or not. So if they don't think that there was a reasonable reason for me to be out, and people who have families, someone in that family is going to get sick for a week, a year at least, especially those people who have children. So I just thought that was incredulous that there was no guarantee for sick days. So when unions fight for those things, when they fought for the $15 minimum wage, again, I'm glad that New York passed it on a regional approach. I think that actually needs to happen more with the laws that we pass, that sometimes it affects different regions differently. I think the idea of 3 different states in New York is a very bad one. In the North Country, the last time I checked the numbers, I think for every $1 we send to Albany, we get $6 back. We certainly need more resources, but our unions are the ones that build the things that we use every day. Infrastructure, is a major one. That it's not a sexy topic, but it's something that we rely on every single day. Whether it's selling broadband, infrastructure, water, sewer, there's so much that our unions fight for that affect everybody else. We all deserve a living wage, and they are the ones who fight for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my next question is, what does equality mean to you? I know that was something that was on your website, and how do you seek to enhance and sustain equality in the North Country?
So there's, for me, 2 different kinds of equality. There's social equality and economic equality. Economic equality is what I talk about when I talk about the lack of cell and broadband specifically. There certainly are other parts of the state where they might not have cell service for a minute or 2 going down a road. There are rural areas in this district where I can go 45 minutes and not have cell service. That's a safety issue. We certainly have had people pass away because they could not call 911. I've been at fire departments, Casa Union Fire Department I was at, and there's no cell service. I mean, that's just mind-boggling that at a place, where there's emergency services, that there's no cell service. Broadband, obviously, for many reasons, COVID has even brought it more to the forefront, where I've had parents call my county office saying, where can I drive my child so I can sit in a parking lot for 2 or 3 hours to do their homework? That's not acceptable. We have a hard time getting doctors into rural areas. Telemedicine is a great tool if you can use it, but if you don't have broadband, you can't use it. So, that's what I mean by economic equality, getting the same resources as other parts of the state. And then social equality is social equality. As I said, in my instances of government, treating people equally, there is no option there. For me, I certainly see it that people will occasionally come in because of either a title or some other reason. They feel that they should be treated better, and I've never believed that, and I've never practiced it. Everyone should be equal under the law.
As someone who's climbed the ladder in local government, what skills or attributes do you possess that make you a clear choice for the North Country voters to elect to office in Albany?
I think it's being able to work with both sides. One of my degrees is in philosophy, and that was a great help in learning how to formulate arguments, logic, but mostly it comes down to something that DC has stopped doing, even Albany has stopped doing, and that's listening to each other. I think it's incredibly important. The old expression of cow trading in politics, where you and I don't agree, but I give you something you want, you give me something I want, neither of us like it, but the work gets done, and the work's not getting done. And so I think it's really important. I've worked with both Republican legislators and Democratic ones. Our majority has switched in Clinton County, and I work very well with all of them. There are times that I will have those kind of side discussions where trying to make either side understand where I'm coming from as a person who is there trying to protect the county's money, and they are, for example, representing one slice of that county, and trying to get them to understand that I might know where they're coming from, but this is what the law says, and this is what I'm here to do. So I think it's just very important to have someone who works well with both sides. You're welcome.
Dan Stack also mentioned wanting to improve broadband connections for the people of the North Country as a main priority in our discussion with him. Why do you feel you could do a better or more efficient job than Stack in securing a stable broadband connection for an area that truly needs it at a time where it truly needs it? You kind of already touched on that, but if you could expand.
Sure. I mean, Dan's been in the assembly for 8 years. Is it better? I don't think so. I think that one of the things that we need to look at is how individual laws or taxes affect broadband. So for example, there was a tax recently passed on laying line, and a major project in St. Lawrence County was canceled because of that. The company wasn't aware of it, didn't include it in their budget projections, and then said, we're out of here. You know, it's a major issue with the rural counties, and again, I think this is where a regional approach is really important, that, you know, there be an exception or a waiver. Hey, the 10 smallest, most rural, least populous counties, this is going to be waived for you, because we need that investment. We need a reason for companies to come and say, oh, I don't have to pay that, I'm gonna go work in these areas first. And it's also just keeping people accountable, keeping companies that we're relying on to do these services accountable, and also making sure that our colleagues around the state understand how important it is, understand how frustrating it is. I've been on calls with people from Long Island and with my campaign manager on a Zoom, and of course she's in Willsboro, which doesn't have the greatest service, and sure enough, the buffering starts, and they're like, oh, that's what you've been talking about. Yes, that is what I've been talking about. It's a serious issue.
Right.
Like I said, affects business, school, health, lots of things, so.
So just as a follow-up, would it be safe to say that you find broadband as a utility?
Yes, it is. It should be treated as such.
Right.
Yes.
So my next question, the first issue that was outlined on your website in like the issues kind of subheader is healthcare. Can you explain why healthcare is so important to you and what you think needs to be done in order to improve the healthcare system in terms of legislation that could be passed?
Sure. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. It's one of the equalizers of us is you could be the richest person in the world, and if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. You don't have a quality of life. So it's important in our rural areas that we have access to, you know, affordable quality healthcare. It's also important that we support our healthcare workers, because when we are in the hospital, it's usually not for a good reason. We are usually at our most vulnerable, and these are the people that care for us. These are the people who, you know, just do the utmost to keep us healthy. One of the problems, unfortunately, that I see is the way healthcare is done. I know, for example, the New York Health Act is out there, and certainly people don't necessarily like my response. I don't think that this is something that New York can take care of. I think it has to be a federal issue. for a few reasons. One is that, which most people don't talk about, the only way we're going to get that would be if the federal government signed a waiver for Medicaid. I don't think Mr. Trump and Mr. Cuomo are going to agree on that, so I don't see that happening. There's also too many balls in the air about how we finance it, and of course, as I always look at everything through a financial lens, Tom DiNapoli is one of the most respected statewide officials we have. He has said that this is not viable financially. You look at Vermont, who is the only state who really tried to do a single payer, and they failed after 3 years because it wasn't affordable. So yes, does everyone deserve healthcare? Absolutely, but we have to do it right. And so again, I think it's on the federal level that has to be taken care of.
Just a follow up to that, do you think then that's what does that involve as far as it being on a federal level? Is it a one payer system, or is it a ACA that's sort of, adapted and better adapted to the reality?
Right. I think that in order to make people comfortable, I think when you talk about universal or single payer, however you want to phrase it, you get the people with the scare tactics that, oh, you're going to wait, 6 months for this, or I think it would be if we have the single payer with the option that, for self-directed or extra insurance that you can buy so that people feel comfortable, and if they're willing and if they have the resources that they can do that. Because I think when we saw the, presidential debates last year and you had a couple of different versions, I think that, it give them a year, 2, 3, hey, is this really working? Do I need this extra insurance? Certainly some of the insurance companies would, go away because they're in the, business of making money. But I think we all certainly see the difference in what something really costs versus what the insurance companies charge for things. It's outrageous. So I think that on the federal level, a single payer with an option, a private option, because I do think eventually that private option would even go away. But if people want it, and if that's going to make them swallow the pill in a sense easier, then why not give it to them?
So changing complete focus here.
Okay.
What's your opinion on police reform in New York State? And sort of related to that, what's your opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement?
Mm-hmm. So the first bail reform bill I would not have voted for. I think the conversation behind it was absolutely right, that everyone should be treated equally. There should not be a separate system for the rich and the poor, and if you don't have the money to pay bail and you sit in jail, that isn't right. But I think it just went too far. I think that judges absolutely need some oversight. The second round certainly was better. I think, we need to keep continuing. But, if someone is repeatedly being arrested, certainly in the second round, they brought more offenses into that, but it's a pattern, it's a behavior. And if someone's arrested 2 or 3 times in a week, a month, whatever it is, the judge's discretion, I think, needs to come in there. They need some more oversight. I think some things that I was disturbed that Dan voted for was to continue to allow racial profiling. I was happy that certainly did not go through, but I just can't imagine in this day and age that that's a consideration. Another one that, he voted that a police officer did not have to report the discharge of a deadly weapon. You should only be discharging a deadly weapon if your intent is to kill someone because a crime is happening or an attempted crime is happening. There's absolutely no reason that should not be reported. There certainly was an instance with, a police officer up in Essex County who filed a false report that youths were harassing him or attacking him or whatever, and nothing was done there. That case, I hope, is still going to, be reviewed, but there is no reason that you should be discharging a deadly weapon without cause.
And as a follow-up.
Oh, Black Lives Matter, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so I attended a rally in Plattsburgh. I think one of the, again, things that people just cannot who are on one side or another cannot see, is that Black Lives Matter, not all police are bad, and we can have this conversation of reforms that need to happen in policing, but, the people who say all lives matter, yes, of course all lives matter, but what did we say after the Boston Marathon bombing? Boston strong. Same thing with the Vegas shooting, Vegas strong. It's not that, no one else matters but Black lives haven't mattered in, the overall conversation. We've never dealt with systemic racism in this country, and they need our attention right now because we are seeing time and time again the bad actors within the policing community doing these things. I think going back to bail reform and the defund the police, I don't believe in defunding the police. Let's give them resources that they need. But nationwide, 1 out of 5 calls to 911 are mental health issues and addiction issues. That is not, they certainly get training, but that's not their specialty. So let's give them resources. Now, you'll certainly have people say, oh, well, you're not gonna have a mental health counselor go answer a bank robbery. Of course not. You're going to have them perhaps go on ride along with a nonviolent crime that's being called in. But since 9/11, we've gotten really good at see something, say something. So if you see someone is having real problems, people are gonna call 911. That's not necessarily a violent crime. There's no reason a mental health professional couldn't ride along with the police. And on the flip side, I've spoken with our police in Plattsburgh. Police officers see some things that we as humans should never see. Some very violent crimes, suicides, child abuse. They have no one to go talk to when they come back from that scene or that crime. One of the officers I talked to, and I said, really, you guys don't subcontract out? He's like, oh, we have a 1-800 number we can call. That isn't the answer. People need to process through something like that. And so again, I think giving them the resources to deal with those mental health issues is vitally important.
Kimberly, on your website, you say that dealing with environmental issues goes far beyond the environment itself. Can you explain that for our viewers and readers, and what do you think needs to be done to ensure a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment?
Sure, so we have in our area tourist economies. We've got Lake George, we've got Lake Placid, we have the High Peaks. People come here to vacation because of the beauty of the area, because of the water, because of the air. And also we are trying to get people to move here. And now that with COVID, people are realizing that they can work remotely if they had cell and broadband coverage. That's one of the reasons they come here is for this natural beauty. So we have to do everything we can to protect the environment. It was, again, discouraging last year to see that Dan did not vote to support the climate change bill here in New York. So it's so much of what we do and who we are is dependent on this environment. Making sure that we are dealing with invasive species, both land and marine. Making sure that the clauses in that bill from last year are being handled. Dealing with clean energy. Up in Plattsburgh, we've got great manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs across the country are dying. They're not in the North Country. They're doing really well. But one of the things within our manufacturing is Nova Bus, and they have electric buses. They've got great contract with the MTA. So those are green jobs. Those are great paying green jobs. Let's see if we can expand that into other manufacturing, whether it's solar cells. Obviously we've got wind turbines, but we've got to look at multiple ways that we can invest in green energy and other infrastructure, whether it's when we're building new buildings, making sure that they're environmentally healthy, to keep that going.
So you say that education is a right, not a privilege. You also talk about investing in vocational and trade schools. With you in the state Senate, how would you invest in our educational system?
New York is not and has not been living up to its obligation to education. It's unfortunate the state actually had to be sued a few years ago to properly fund schools, and they are still not doing that. That's inexcusable. So we need to make sure that they are getting the resources they need. It's also not fulfilling its obligation to community colleges. The model of community colleges was that the state would pay a third, the county would pay a third, and the students pay it a third. And I can tell you as a county treasurer, the New York State is not fulfilling that third that they were supposed to. So they have got to invest in education.
Could you talk about your experience, not just within government, but with community service as well, and how will that experience help you if you're elected?
Sure, great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
We don't get to talk about that a lot. So the majority of my community service is through Kiwanis, which is a global organization dedicating to improving the world one community and one child at a time. And I've been fortunate to be in that organization for over 20 years. I've served at the local, state, and international levels. And it actually is a good similarity in a sense that, you know, as you go into these positions, and everything is political. So being able to work with others. In New York, for example, we have 27 regions called divisions, and when you are elected the head of that division, you're a lieutenant governor. So using similar language. I've had the privilege of serving the Adirondack division twice as its lieutenant governor. And we move around our conferences and conventions around the state of New York every year so that we're always visiting a different area, which, you know, is great. But there isn't a place I can go in New York that within a half an hour I can call someone and find a fellow Kiwanian. And I think that's important in government, that you kind of do the same, that you have those relationships with people throughout the state and not just, you know, in your area. So I think that collaboration, that listening to each other, hey, what is your club doing that we can kind of emulate here? What programs are in your town that we can emulate here? I think, you know, that's one of the ways that works. But it's also, I think and I hope everyone should have a life out of politics, and there's, to me, no better thing than community service, to see how we are improving our community through the actions that we do. I was, for example, started a program. I was watching a PBS documentary a few years ago on local veterans and the struggles that they have when they come back. And being a kids organization, I said, how can Kiwanis kind of deal with that or help families or bring something to their lives? And so I started a program where local military families, we send children of military families, whether it's active, reserves, or veterans, to summer camp for free for 2 weeks. So, you know, taking something like that and improving those people's lives. And we have, you know, kids who return every year, and they're you know, loving the experience. The parents are grateful that they have this experience for their kids. And, you know, that's just one of many things that we do, improving, you know, the lives of our community.
My final question for you is, what are your thoughts on the current state of the presidential race, and in particular, the president's responses to his recent COVID diagnosis?
Again, I think the negativity in politics has outlived any usefulness. I've never thought it to be useful, but sometimes when you're in a situation that isn't comfortable for you, it actually helps you grow. But I think that it's just bad on so many levels. I think it's a bad example to our kids. I think the name calling, the misinformation, putting people down that don't agree with you. As far as the president's diagnosis of COVID, I think it was just completely irresponsible for him to, you know, do that drive around the hospital. I mean, that vehicle is hermetically sealed. You're putting these people at a risk because you want to go for a ride. I mean, how many people who have COVID, you know, are in the hospital and they can't even leave their room, and yet he thought it was a good idea to, you know, take a joyride so he could see his supporters. I just think it was completely irresponsible.
So, is there anything else that you would like to tell us that we haven't asked you, that you think is important for our readers and our viewers to know?
I think we've covered most of it. I think just the most important things are my financial background, having, someone who doesn't need to know the letter next to your name to have a conversation with you. One thing I will say is most politicians will not say these words out loud. I don't know everything. I think it's important for people in politics to surround themselves with people who are smarter than them and to have conversations with different groups, certainly during the process, but also afterward, so that if there is something that, isn't necessarily one of your, top things of, in your wheelhouse, for example, that you have people that you can go to. I think we don't do enough of that. I think sometimes politicians pass something because it makes them look good. And if they just talk to the people that do the job every day, they'd get a different example. We had that during COVID where they passed that it sounded great on paper that people could have more time to pay their school taxes. And normally counties make school districts whole or towns whole when people don't pay their taxes. The problem is that we re-levy people's school taxes onto their land and county bill. This bill said counties don't have to make the school districts whole, and because they were giving them 6, 7, 8 months, I can't remember what the time frame was, there'd be no re-levying. So the school districts are in the same position we all are with not having lots of funds. So now we're not gonna make them whole, and they might not get a re-levy until the following year. The County Treasurers Association, we're certainly of different parties. It was the only time in my 7 years I've known that we unanimously passed something saying, do not do this, it is a bad idea. So, and we as the municipalities or school districts look like the bad guys because we decided not to opt in, when if you had asked us our opinion, we would have told you, here are the reasons this is not a good idea, or could have helped rewrite it. So I think, that's just something too that politicians really need to, when they're crafting laws, talk to the people who do it every day. The only other thing is that I do believe in term limits. I know you had, Claudia on a while ago, and we disagree a little bit. My difference is that we have a lot of people who sometimes start in the assembly, go to the Senate, or even if they spend their entire career in one house or the other. Politics should not be a career. Dan actually said when he was asked why he was running, both in the beginning and just a few weeks ago, well, it's the next logical step. No, that's not why you run for office. You run for office to make people's lives better, not to further your career. So my proposal would be a combined, doesn't matter what part of the state legislature you're in, no more than 20 years. So if you want to spend 10 in one house and 10 in another, 20 in all, doesn't matter. But yes, I do believe in term limits. I think that legislators also need to be year-round. We should have the same calendar as Congress. It shouldn't just be, hey, you're in session from January to June. It's one of the problems of incumbency is, once session is over, people who are in office have a lot of time to go and campaign, whereas someone who, like myself, works a regular job, doesn't have that luxury. I'm not saying they don't do work on the off season. They are supposed to be doing their constituent services, but it makes it harder. It shouldn't be hard to get into politics. We should want as many people, kind of fighting for these positions, and that generally isn't what we get. The higher the office, sometimes the less people who are willing, because there are so many obstacles to running for office, and there really shouldn't be.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us. I know it's a busy time of year, and you are far from home right now, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy coming here, and I appreciate you giving me that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.